Yesterday, I encouraged us to laugh a little bit more in our homes and our marriages and our families. Well, my focal point wife, Mike Vestal, and I have been doing a lot of that. And I hope that you have as well. I give him a hard time about his driving. We give each other a hard time. It's like we're married. All right, so today, we're talking about the house of the righteous stands, continuing our theme from yesterday. What I want to talk about today is how can we build a family fortress that will withstand the attacks from both without and from within. Some of the attacks are from without, some of them are from within. I'm reminded of the words of Joshua chapter 24 and verse 15, as they stood there at the beginning of what could be something incredible and something that could continue to be incredible. And he said, look, you're going to have to choose. But as for me and my house, we're going to choose to serve the Lord. By the way, forgotten sometimes is what is recorded from verse 16 and down, where they said, yes, we're going to do it too. I mean, he was a positive example about building a family fortress that says this is what we're going to do. We're going to be the family that God wants us to be. But that's easier said than done, isn't it? So this morning, 5 things that are going to help us to build a family fortress. And because I am at a lectureship, they are alliterated. I am going to alliterate or obliterate this lesson for you this morning because I want you to be able to remember it. 5 things to help us build a family fortress. The first thing we need to do is we need to have a strong sense of commitment. A strong sense of commitment. Now that seems obvious, right? But we live in a culture where the commitment levels seem to have lessened, where people don't take the responsibilities and the promises or the vows of family as seriously as they should be. And yet Jesus' words still ring true today, don't they? In Matthew chapter 19, verses 5 and following. We make that commitment, we honor it, and we stick with it, and we are committed to it. Now, I also know my audience. And at this point, you're right. We agree. Preach on. And maybe even have a tendency to, kind of shift it into cruise control. But I don't want you comfortable. I mean, we need to be committed to our marriage vows, okay? But I kind of suspect that you are. So I'm not going to talk about that commitment. I want to talk about what we as parents can do to demonstrate a commitment to our children. We don't often talk about that, do we? We often fail at it. Unintentionally, we fail at it. I know that I can look back in hindsight and realize there are times that I failed in demonstrating a commitment to my children. So let's talk about that for a minute. If you have children, you have a commitment. You have made a commitment, whether you even considered it or not. When we get married, there's a lot of thinking, a lot of, goes into it, hopefully praying. There's a ceremony, there's legalities and an official vow. It's easier to have a child than get a driver's license. We don't necessarily have to think about all the commitment that goes into that. But there is a commitment. And what I want us to think about this morning are 2 ways that we can demonstrate a commitment to our children as we should do in our families. The first way we can demonstrate commitment to our children is by conveying to them, I didn't use the word say, I'm using the word convey because that happens in a variety of ways. Convey to them that they are a blessing and not a burden. There are a lot of children who grow up feeling like they are nothing but a burden to their parents. We actually have heard the term the forgotten generation. And there are a lot of children who feel like, they may not be, but they feel like they are unwanted. And what we need to be making sure is we are not conveying that in any way. That they are loved and that they are wanted. By the way, Can we just go ahead and agree to forever strike from our collective vocabulary the term illegitimate child? There is not a single child who is not legitimate. The circumstances under which they were conceived may have been sinful, but they are not illegitimate. Every child is legitimate. And they are a blessing. And sometimes, maybe we don't convey that as much as we should. Have your children ever overheard you complaining about all the going and doing that you have to do with them sometimes? Oh, they're running me ragged. Oh man, we've got to go here, and then I got to take them there, and they got to take them there. Now, you're just kind of venting. But guess what they're hearing? Now, maybe you need to cut down on extracurricular activities. But that's your problem, not theirs, right? And maybe you do need to vent. That's why you have somebody else to talk to. But don't leave your children with the impression that they are just a burden. Teenage girl left this suicide note. Dear Mom, I'm very sorry I was ever born. It seems to me that I've ruined your happiness. I've chosen this way out so that you can be happy again. Odds are that girl was loved. Odds are that girl's mother never, ever got over that loss. But that girl didn't feel it. She felt like she was just a burden. We need to convey, and that's done in a variety of ways, that our children are a blessing and not a burden. That's one way we show commitment. Here's another way that we can demonstrate commitment to our children. And that is that we can make sure they know they are loved without condition. We want them to do better. We want them to make good grades and to excel and exceed. And that's good. And maybe we like them better when that happens. But they need to know there is no GPA you can have or not have that will change the way I love you. Isn't this a great looking group of kids over here? I'm glad they're here. And you know, parenting is hard. I know you might say, oh yeah, I get that. No, you don't get that yet. By the way, I have a daughter who just turned 24 today. And went skydiving last night with her husband to do it. And I found out they're already talking about children. They've been married 2 years. They're already talking about children. And the conversation has gone like this. Why would anybody want children? It's hard. And sometimes we don't mean to, but we leave the impression that when you have done well, we love you more. Any other parents think back where maybe that impression was left? A couple of years ago, my youngest had a really good game. He ran the ball for 224 yards and 4 touchdowns. I was way more excited about it than he was. He's also done some things that made me anything but excited. And again, I was more disappointed than he seemed to be. And I may have left the impression that my level of love changed in that. I hope we don't do that. Because you are loved without condition. There is no GPA, no number of home runs, no nothing that can change the way we love our children, right? But we don't always do a good job in communicating that. We want you to do well, and we want you to excel and meet your potential, and that's why we do that sometimes. But here's the problem, parents. If we don't demonstrate that our love is without condition, we end up raising typically this is what happens, one of 2 kinds of children. Number 1, the workaholic overachiever who's never pleased with himself. He has grown up that is never good enough. Just this week, a young woman told me that when she was growing up, her mother was very critical, and if she made a 98 on a test, her mother's response would be, why didn't you make 100? She said she still struggles with doing that to her own children. If you raise your children that you've got to excel and exceed before you, I love you and I affirm you and I praise you, then you're going to create either that overachiever workaholic who's never satisfied, never pleased with himself or his family, or a quitter. Because why bother? Nothing's ever good enough. I made a 98 and it wasn't good enough. Why bother? And see, we don't mean to do that. But that can happen if we don't demonstrate that our love for our children is without condition. That's commitment. Well, how do we motivate? Well, I mean, we need to motivate, right? I mean, y'all understand. Y'all are really slackers sometimes, right? I mean, we don't want you to be that. We're trying to motivate you. How do you motivate? Well, you don't motivate by withholding love unless certain levels are approved and excelled and exceeded. We don't withhold love like that. And that's not how we motivate. We also, by the way, here's a biggie, we don't motivate by comparing our children to other children. How many times has that happened? Well, old Johnny did it. Why can't you be more like... But now wait a minute. Have your children ever said, well, so-and-so's mama lets them do it? And what's your reply? Well, I'm not so-and-so's mama. Exactly. And what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If you don't want to be compared to other parents, don't compare your children to other children. That's not how we motivate. We motivate when we demonstrate that there is a commitment that is expressed in love that is without condition. Commitment. It makes for a family fortress. There's a second thing that strong families do, a second thing that will help us to shore up, and that is we share communion. We share communion. And if you're thinking Lord's Supper, you don't understand the word communion. And perhaps you don't even understand the significance of the Lord's Supper. This is where we share time with each other. They did a survey among teenagers, 1,500 teenagers. What's your favorite thing? What's the thing that you like most about family? The number one answer given in some form or another by 90% of the children, the teenagers, was doing things together. Wish I had a bigger house, wish I had a car or a nicer car or whatever. The number one answer was doing things together. Now, are we talking about quality time or are we talking about quantity time? Yes. Yes. One of the biggest bill of goods lies that we have been sold is, it's okay if you don't spend much time as long as the little time you spend is good time. And so some have made themselves feel better about latching onto this idea of quality time. Why does there have to be this either or situation? We need to spend time with each other, with our spouses. We need to spend time with our children. We should spend time together. And it's not easy to do sometimes because we are busy and there are a lot of things going on and there are a lot of ways that we can be spending our time. We used to talk about, the family's in the room and they're just looking at the TV. That's not really sharing time together. I would agree. But things have actually gone one step further away because now we each have our own device. Sitting in the same room with a laptop, a tablet, or a phone, and Netflix and Wi-Fi. We're not even sharing the same screen anymore. There are a lot of things that can take away our time and attention from each other, but one of the things that makes us stronger is to spend time with each other. Couples need to make time to spend with each other. But what happens sometimes is we neglect time and then we try to make it up with some big blowout trip. I hadn't done anything with my kids in 3 months, but man, we're going to go to Disney World and we're going to blow it out for a week. We're going to drop $79,000 in 5 days and come home exhausted, and that's going to make up for it, Not at all. Not at all. We need to make time. We need to spend time to commune with each other. And I mean even in the mundane, ordinary things of life. That's where stuff happens that you will remember. Those are the things that make for the memories and the bonds. When you're shooting hoops in the driveway, you're raking leaves together. I used to have, and I'm now at the point where everything is mostly used to be. It's not that funny, Wayne. But I used to have this practice that I didn't go on an errand, but that I didn't take one child. Not two, not three, one. Because they're different when you separate them. Kind of like wild animals, if you get one away from the pack, they behave better. So I would take one. I'm going to Walmart to go pick up something. I'm going to Lowe's, and I'm going to find something there. I'm taking one child, and we're going to do something. If we bought some food, I'm going to act like this is a big secret. We're going to get into the food. Don't tell Mom. And we get into it and we eat a little bit, and they giggle because they feel naughty, We had this, it's probably been a dozen years ago. My son, who is now 22, I took him and we were going to Walmart. I can tell you right where we were parked. We were at the red light waiting to turn left into Walmart, and we just got a new used minivan, which was pretty cool. I mean, you've reached a point in life you didn't really expect to be when you think your minivan is cool, but it had this, the stereo controls were on the back side of the steering wheel. And I suddenly had an idea, and he's sitting over there in the passenger seat, and I said, volume up. And he couldn't see it, but I was pushing the button, and the volume was going up. His eyes got this big around. He said, did you do that? I said, yeah, you can do that. And I said, volume down. Wow. I said, change channel, because there's a different one on the other side. Change channel. It went to the next station. He said, can I do it? And I said, yeah. So he says it, and I made it do whatever he says. And to this day, no, you're getting ahead of me. To this day, we laugh about that. In fact, last week, I had my youngest one with me, and just for kicks, I did the same thing, volume up, and he laughed. We've done the Disney thing. And if you're a Disney freak, we'll pray for you. But we've done that. It was fine. Went there, did that. I'm telling you, if you survey our family, that one incident waiting to turn into Walmart has led to more laughs and more memories than all of Disney put together. It's the mundane, ordinary things where we share life together. And if you think you got to do some big blowout, you're missing it. Life's happening every single day. Time is passing every single day too. Strong families share communion. Number 3, strong families communicate effectively. They communicate effectively. Now, you saw that coming, right? Because you saw the 2 C's and you knew communication was coming. And this is where you tell some story about communication and how it's hard, and some case where it failed, and it just proves how necessary communication is. And then you say, so we need to communicate better. Next point, I've done that. Guess what? It doesn't help a bit, does it? I mean, we're all on board that we need to communicate better. That's why tomorrow, that'll be the focus. Tomorrow at this session, the 7 B's of communication. We're going to talk about, it's not alliterated though. See, I'm tricking you. Don't get ahead of me. These directors, give them an inch, they think they're a ruler. By the way, yesterday I was talking about keeping up with the Joneses. It never crossed my mind. It was nice being at Focal Point. I'll never be invited back again. We're going to talk about the 7 B's of communication. That'll be our focus tomorrow. We're going to talk about 7 real-world, practical, down-to-earth things to help us communicate more effectively in our families. Next, number 4, good families, strong families, those who have built a fortress, have coping skills. They have learned to deal effectively with the problems of life. Little boy got into trouble. His mother had about had enough. You know, she'd had it up to here. My mother always said that. I've had it up to here. Anybody else's? My mom's only 4'10". That wasn't necessarily all that high, but I knew what it meant. Mom had it up to here with a little Sparky. So she sent him into her closet, said, sit there and you think about what you've done. 15 minutes later, she went back to check on him. And she said, how's it going in here? And he said, I've spit in every shoe and I'm waiting on more spit. Sometimes we don't like each other, right? Sometimes we have problems and challenges even in our families. And I don't know about you, but more often than I wish were true, I have had somebody tell me, we wish our family was like yours. We wish our marriage was like y'all's. And my first thought is, no, I'm not sure that you really want that all the time. You think you know, but you don't know because all you know is what you see. Everybody, every couple, every family has its challenges. And what you see on Facebook is not real. Zuckerberg might be selling it to the highest bidder, but it's not real. There's a lot of problems that can happen. But here's the problem. All we know is what we see. We think they've got it made. Why don't we have it made? What's wrong with us? I tell you, there's not anything wrong with you. You're normal. The difference between the families that do well and the families that don't do well is they found a way to deal with the problems. The coping skills. Do you know there are people in this audience this morning who have been married for 30 years or more, who have had more problems and more challenges and worked through more of the stuff of life than some people who didn't make it 5 years in a marriage? What's the difference? How do you cope with the problems and the challenges? You know, if problems caused divorces, we'd all be divorced. Some wouldn't have made it out of the honeymoon. We have to learn how to handle the problems and the challenges of life. By the way, they say love is grand, but divorce is 20 grand. So that's something you need to remember. Our homes can be challenging, can't they? They can be filled with stress and tension like we talked about yesterday. There was one man that said that even though his foot was size 10, he wore a size 7 shoe to work. Somebody said, why in the world do you do that? He said, that way when I get home, at least I have one thing to look forward to, taking my shoes off. It's the only thing he had to look forward to when he got home. Okay, maybe Wayne will invite me back now because he really liked that one a lot. But don't you know that every family's had its problems? What about the first one? What about the very first family? Don't you know Adam and Eve had their challenges? I can just imagine Adam's out walking with Cain and Abel and Seth one day, and they look over and there's this beautiful garden. And the boys say, wow, look at that. And he goes, yeah, we used to live there, but your mother ate us out of house and home, you know. And then she hears that. She says, come here, let me count your ribs. But you know, they really did have problems, didn't they? Can you imagine one of your children kills one of your children? Families have had problems and challenges from literally the very first family. The difference is, how do we handle it? How do we resolve it? How do we work through it? How do we forgive it? How do we move on? I'm told that the Chinese language has, does not have letters but has symbols. What I'm told is the same symbol that represents crisis also represents opportunity. And the only difference in which you interpret it is the context in which it's found. Crisis and opportunity. And you think about how many of our blessings have come but wrapped in problems. How many of our opportunities have come completely entangled in crises. And our families have them. And if you have them, you're not, nothing wrong with you at all. But how do you resolve it? How do you work through it? That's the difference. That's the challenge. My focal point wife asked me 2 days ago, you've traveled all over the world, all these different countries, what have you learned the most? Immediately, I learned this. My first answer, without even having to think about it, my first answer is, the one thing I've learned from traveling all over the world is people are people. People have the same problems, the same needs, the same concerns, the same desires, the same feelings, the same emotions. We're all the same. And that means we all have the same struggles. And when I am in a foreign country and it's enlightening to them that they think we've got it made. Like we don't have problems, we don't hurt, we don't suffer, we don't cry. They can't believe it. We're all the same. A couple of weeks ago I was on a train in Rome and I was riding I'd just flown in from Delhi and I was riding the train from Rome airport to the middle of the city. It's a nice train. I was sitting there by myself. There were 2 seats in front of me and we'd been going about a minute or two and this older couple came walking past me and the wife pointed at the 2 empty seats and the man grunted. He had that disposition that he just wasn't going to be happy. And it seemed like she was trying to make him happy. Oh, here, let me sit here. And he grunted. And I immediately thought, and I live near Montgomery, Alabama, and I immediately thought, I bet I know 30 men who would act just like that. Old grumpy pants. Just can't be happy about anything. Some old curmudgeon. Well, they sat there, they went ahead, apparently they didn't find anything he liked up there. They came back, ultimately sat in front of me. But he complained the whole time. He was messing with the shades. Nothing was right because he was fidgeting, antsy. Finally, they get up. It's only a 30-minute ride. They get up and leave to go back to the back, I guess to find some other better seat. And that's when I saw it. He picked up his backpack, and on the front of it was the logo of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Yep. Old grumpy pants is yelling, "Roll Tide." Yep. Go Dogs. Anyway, y'all laughed a lot more than they laughed in Alabama when I told that story. We're all the same. We have the same needs, same struggles, same emotions. And the same things that make for a strong family, in any country, in any world, at any time, are still the same. One more thing. We've got fajitas out there. We're not going to be delayed today. Number 5. You want to build a strong family fortress, then you need to have a strong sense of consecration. A strong sense of consecration. There is no way, if you're going to define it by God's definitions, and I'm assuming we're on the same page with that, if you're going to define successful family by His definition, you can't do it without Him. And you cannot do it without putting your priorities in line with His priorities. God takes first place. There have been studies done about even something as simple as church attendance. And I say simple because isn't that the least we can do? I think some people act like that's like the most, but I would disagree. Studies have shown that when both parents attend all the services together, 76% of the children will grow up to also be faithful in their church attendance. Where only the dad is, 55% of the children do. Where only mom does, 16% do. By the way, dads, you think you're not important? You are. By the way, let me just pause. All right, I still got time. Don't worry about the fajitas. Let me just pause right here. This coming Sunday is Mother's Day. This is totally off subject, okay? But I'm a preacher, and I think this is for a preacher, so I'm going to say something. Mother's Day, we praise those mothers. Father's Day, what do? We run those sorry dogs down for being a bunch of slackers. One man who didn't normally go to church went to church on Father's Day because his wife and daughters wanted him to do it, and he said, this is how you treat Father on Father's Day. I think I know how a duck feels the first day of duck season. Let me encourage you to build up and praise the dads. They need to know how important they are. By the way, how many times have you ever motivated a grown-up by berating him in public? Just something to think about. Praise the mothers, yes. How about we do the same thing for the dads? They're important too. More than they realize, and far more than society would paint that picture today. All right, back on topic. Consecration. We need to have that strong sense of doing what's right, because even church attendance, by the way, if mothers only, then it's 15%, and then if neither, the statistic is 6% of the children do. And that's just the simple. That's just the external. If you really want to see things explode in an exponential positive way, then be consecrated at home too. How about that? Because your children need to see you acting at home. By the way, isn't that where we see the good, bad, and ugly? Oh man, and for those of us who preach, for those of us whose children, we were the only preacher they'd ever known, that's a challenge. I'm saying the right things on Sunday. I struggle sometimes on Tuesday. Do the right thing and they see it. To be consecrated at home, your spouse needs to see that. You need to be the same person when you get in that car leaving the assembly as you were in the assembly. And so there needs to be a consistency in our life that our family, and only our family, will ever see and ever know. One woman said to her husband, I wish you cared for me as much as you do for your dog. You talk sweet to him, you pet him, and you give him treats. There needs to be a level of consecration that exists not only outside of the home, but especially inside of the family. And there needs to be this consistency of consecration to what is really important and to what makes God's priorities and what makes us pleasing to Him. 3 little boys were out camping in the backyard in a tent. They were out there with their flashlights and talking. The dad kind of wanted to hear what was going on, so he snuck outside and he overheard this conversation. One little boy was kind of bragging, and he said, my dad knows the mayor. One little boy wasn't going to be outdone. He one-upped him and said, that's nothing. My dad knows the governor. And then this man heard his son say, that's nothing. My dad knows God. Little boy said, no, he doesn't. He said, he sure does. He said, how do you know? He said, because just this morning, I heard him talking to him. Consecration. In our homes, let's demonstrate, not only be committed, but demonstrate, convey in a variety of ways our commitment to each other. Let us also make sure that we are doing the things that would make for effective communication. We'll talk about all that tomorrow. We're going to talk about how to just really make that happen. Let's make sure we're doing these things that we've talked about today to make for a family fortress, something that can withstand the attacks of Satan, something that can withstand even the attacks from within. In our flawed, inconsistent beings, sometimes we present the biggest enemy to our families. So let's do what we need to do to make sure that we build a strong family fortress.
I will sing of my Redeemer and His wondrous love to me. On the cruel cross He suffered from the curse to set me free. Sing of my Redeemer, my Redeemer, with His blood He purchased me, with His blood He purchased me. On the cross He sealed my pardon, He sealed my cross He sealed my pardon, paid the debt and made me free, and made me free. sing of my Redeemer, with his blood he purchased me, on the cross he sealed my pardon, paid the debt and made me free, I will sing of my Redeemer and his heavenly love to me. He from death to life hath brought me, Son of God, with him to be. Sing of my Redeemer, with his blood he purchased me, on the cross he sealed my pardon, paid the debt and made me free,
All praise to him who reigns above, in majesty supreme, who gave his Son for man to die, that he might man redeem. Blessed be the name, blessed be the name, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name, blessed be the name, blessed be the name of the Lord. His name above.
Speech on. Timer. Music recognition selected. Screen